Welcome, everyone. You are all muted, but we do want to hear from you. We'll give you details in a moment. This program is being recorded and the video will be posted and shared with you later today. We're expecting a crowd, so if you'd like to focus on the speaker and the slides, select Speaker View in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Just going to give a few minutes for people to come in. And welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today to kick off the 2022 legislative session with Maine's Environmental Priorities Coalition. And a special thank you to all the lawmakers joining us today, taking time out of their busy schedules and hearings, as well as and a special shout out to Colby College's Advocating for the Environment class who's joined us today. We'll get started in just a moment. While folks are logging on, please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat. Please share your name, your pronouns, and the town you're joining us from. If you represent an organization or are a member of the press, please note that in the chat as well. And after those intros, we'll close the chat, but you'll still be able to message us directly. So I think we're good to go. I still see some more people in the waiting room, but I see people are filling in the chat. If you've just joined us, please fill out the chat with your organization and your name and your town and your pronouns. Thank you so much. My name is Beth Ahern, and I'm the Director of Government Affairs at Maine Conservation Voters and Maine Conservation Alliance. Thank you for joining today. Our organizations represent more than 10,000 members and supporters dedicated to protecting Maine's environment and our democracy. Maine Conservation Alliance does that through education, collaboration, and advocacy, and Maine Conservation Voters by influencing public policy, holding politicians accountable, and winning elections. One of the best things Maine Conservation Alliance, or MCA, gets to do is convene and facilitate Maine's Environmental Priorities Coalition. Since 2004, the EPC has brought people together to protect Maine's air, land, and water, safeguard public health, tackle climate change, and build healthy, vibrant, inclusive communities through collective action and legislative advocacy. Today, the EPC includes 37 environmental, public health, conservation, and climate action organizations. Together, these organizations, large and small, national, statewide, and local, represent more than 120,000 Maine people who want to protect the good health, good jobs, and quality of life that our environment provides. I wish we had more time for all of these incredible organizations to introduce themselves and their work today. I hope that everyone has had a chance to introduce themselves in the chat. If you haven't, please do so. And I promise that everyone who registered for this program will receive a follow-up email later today with contact information for all the EPC members. We have a tight agenda today, and I want to talk about a few technical details before we dive in. You're all muted, but we do want to hear from you. Please send your questions to Kathleen Meal through the chat as they occur to you. We'll compile those questions from all the chats for our Q&A at the end of the program. If you're having technical difficulties, please message Will Sedlak for help. This event is being recorded, and the video will be posted on our website and on YouTube later this afternoon, so you can go and get it there. So now to the beef, or the non-beef for us vegetarians. Each year, the Environmental Priorities Coalition identifies a slate of priority bills that will have the greatest impact in protecting Maine's environment, public health, and climate future. These aren't the only bills our organizations track, support, and celebrate, but they represent our best opportunities to protect our climate, reduce toxic pollution, and advance environmental justice. This year, the EPC agenda includes 7 priority bills and some of them are familiar to you. LD 1626, the bill to recognize tribal sovereignty. LD 1639, to stop filling Maine's landfills with out-of-state waste. LD 489, to add the Pine Tree Amendment to the Maine Constitution. LD 736, to expand the state's ecological reserve system. LD 1902, to fund opportunities for climate education in Maine schools. A bill that doesn't have an LD yet, a bill to upgrade water quality classifications on Maine's rivers. And a defensive priority, which means a bill that we do not want to pass. We were trying to defeat this bill that would block our efforts to restore a free-flowing and healthy Kennebec River. I'll let the spokespeople for each of these bills share more detail, and we'll send a follow-up email later today with links to the fact sheets. So first to speak to us today is Senator Ann Carney, who is the sponsor of 1639. Thank you so much, Senator Carney.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be here today. And before I start, I just want to thank the broad coalition of people, including yourselves and Don't Waste Me, who have been supporting this effort. So if I asked you to name a mountain owned by the people of Maine that is defined in our statutes as a, quote, critical natural resource, you might say Katahdin. But I'm actually talking about Juniper Ridge landfill. Our waste management laws recognize that environmentally sound landfills are challenging to develop. In fact, Maine has established a solid waste hierarchy to conserve the state's limited landfill capacity. Landfill capacity, especially at our state-owned Juniper Ridge landfill, must be used carefully and consistently with our solid waste hierarchy. The good news is that we've been working to preserve the capacity at Juniper Ridge in a careful, bipartisan way. In the last legislature, 2 policy changes to preserve the state-owned landfill capacity and to limit disposal of unprocessed solid waste had unanimous support in committee and passed the House and the Senate by unanimous consent. LD 1639, an act to protect the health and welfare of Maine communities and reduce harmful solid waste, is yet another step forward in aligning the use of our state-owned landfill with Maine's solid waste hierarchy. It will also, over time, require a processor that sends solid waste to Juniper Ridge to meet the same recycling rates that already apply to similar businesses in Maine. Right now, Juniper Ridge is filling up at an alarming rate. We have about 6 years of volume left. A significant cause is construction demolition debris imported from Massachusetts and from other states that have more stringent solid waste laws than Maine. Hundreds of thousands of tons of CDD is minimally processed and then deposited in our state-owned landfill. Our state-owned landfill is a critical natural resource. We should be making sure that it's used to benefit the people of Maine and that it's used in line with our solid waste hierarchy. Reduce, reuse, recycle, compost, and process. Putting solid waste in a landfill is the option of last resort. And LD 1639 will make sure that we're not importing from solid waste from other states that takes up the landfill space we Mainers need. Thanks for your support, everyone, and please reach out to your elected representatives and senators to ask them to provide support to this legislation.
Thank you very much, Senator Carney. That was so well done. Next up is Senator Chloe Maxman, who is the sponsor of the Pine Tree Amendment. Welcome, Senator Maxman.
Hi there, everybody. I'm on committee right now, so double zooming, and I apologize for joining from my phone. I hope my internet is okay. I'm so excited to be here today and to get to talk with all of you and just celebrate all of the amazing work that's happening in our state.
Oops, Senator, you're cutting out. Yeah.
Senator Maxman, if you can hear us, try turning off your video and we'll see if that helps the problem.
One second, I'm so sorry. Okay. Can you hear me better now?
I think so.
Okay.
can, Senator.
I apologize for that. Anyways, Pine Tree Amendment would add to the Maine Constitution the right to a clean and healthy environment. I was a little bit skeptical when I first heard this proposal from two constituents who brought it to me a couple years ago, but I've grown to see it as one of the most foundational and important pieces of policy that we can be voting on. All of the bills that we're talking here today are so important, and we hope that they get passed into law. But most importantly, we want them to stay in law. We don't want these priorities to be subject to political whim. And the only way that we do that is by putting in our Constitution the right to a healthy environment. We have a right to bear arms in our Constitution, and we cannot pass any laws that would go against that. And we want to do the same thing when it comes to protecting our natural resources. We don't want our next governor, if they're not on our side, to be going against all of these important priorities. So that's what the Pine Tree Amendment is all about. It's about citizens being able to hold our government accountable to the principles of environmental protection. And that's it.
Great. Thank you very much, Senator Maxman, and thank you for joining us from your committee room. Next, we'll hear from Representative Nicole Grahowski, who will talk about the Ecological Reserve Bill that she's sponsoring.
Thank you so much, Beth. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'll start with a quote from naturalist Aldo Leopold, who once wrote, "To keep every cog and wheel is the first precaution of intelligent tinkering." Mainers had that same idea when they created the Ecological Reserve System 22 years ago. This bill, LD 736, seeks to improve upon the work Mainers thoughtfully began over 2 decades ago. One of the main purposes of the Ecological Reserve System is to protect all of the different types of habitats found in Maine through both public and private conservation. By conserving a representative set of lands, the state can protect the myriad species that depend on each of these diverse ecosystems. Ecological reserves are also scientifically valuable. They're basically experimental controls. Scientists can compare what's happening on ecological reserves where there are very few disturbances to what's happening on nearby lands that are more heavily impacted by people. To date, Maine's Bureau of Parks and Lands has designated 19 ecological reserve sites covering roughly 96,000 acres, or about half of 1% of the state. These include some beautiful, iconic Maine landscapes and recreation destinations like Donnell Pond in my neck of the woods, the Cutler Coast, parts of the Mahoosucs, Bigelow Preserve, Mount Abram, and Big Spencer. But we have not yet accomplished the goal to protect an effective example of all the habitat types found in Maine, all of Leopold's cogs and wheels, if you will. For example, large forest blocks in southern Maine are not currently protected, and neither are examples of northern hardwood forest and cedar swamps up in northern Maine. And yet there are limits in existing law that effectively prohibit the ecological reserve system to expand as it was originally intended. Not only will this bill allow us to protect additional ecosystem types, it aligns with several national and global conservation objectives. For example, the Wildlands and Woodlands Report of the Harvard Forest has set a target of conserving 7% of New England in ecological reserve type management. For reference, right now, across public and private lands, Maine has about 4.6% of its area in this type of conservation. So we're making good progress, but we still have work to do. Public lands add incredible value to our state. And as a subset of all public lands, ecological reserves provide critically important habitat for Maine's at-risk species. They conserve biodiversity, sequester and store carbon, and offer exceptional recreation opportunities. So LD 736 would allow Maine people through our Bureau of Parks and Lands to permanently conserve our treasures and to lead by example, demonstrating that the protection of land and biodiversity can be a climate solution and achieved while supporting our economy. I'm so pleased this bill has earned the support of the Environmental Priorities Coalition, and I look forward to our work together to get it over the finish line this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Grochowski. And I want to remind people, even though you're muted, you please send your questions through Kathleen Meal in the chat, and we will try to address those later. So next we hear from Representative Lydia Bloom, who is joined by Anya Wright from Sierra Club, Maine, and she's going to talk about the climate change education bill that she's sponsoring. Representative Bloom.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for promoting this to one of your priorities. It was a new bill that I put forth in, for this session, and I really appreciate it being on this list. This bill would provide much needed and often requested support to teachers across Maine who need the support in order to meet the existing standards and to best serve their students. It is not a mandate. Rather, it funds climate education professional development for teachers and promotes partnerships between schools and community organizations. It directly addresses the need for equitable access to climate change education. Our state has shown strong leadership on climate change and is moving into an economy that needs to fight against and adapt to it. Maine workforce development depends on a well-educated pipeline of students. There are exciting job and career opportunities in Maine that have grown from the climate crisis, and Maine can help its students see and realize these possibilities. We need their energy. We need their innovation. It can also, in that way, we give us all hope for their environmental future. I am personally worried about the anxiety over climate change that has beset many of our young people. Many young women do not even know if they want children. Knowledge and engagement is power over that anxiety, and that's what this bill will also help achieve. The bill aligns with the goals of the Maine Climate Action Plan, namely the goal of increasing public education offerings related to climate and energy. Working it now aligns with the timeline that calls for this process in our Maine Won't Wait plan to begin in 2021. In addition, there are existing and coming grants that all our schools need to be well positioned for. The faster we start acting on these needs of our students and educators, the faster we can meet the ambitious goals of our climate and clean energy plans. We have a decade of doing that we must engage in, and we need to change our projection, change the way that we're emitting greenhouse gas emissions, and empowering our youth is one way to do that. Let's do what we can in Maine. So I wanted to also just invite Anya Wright, who I have worked with on the Maine Climate Council, to say a few words.
Thank you, Representative Bloom, and welcome, Anya.
Thanks, Beth, and thanks, Representative Bloom. And I know we're a little short on time, so I'll try and keep it quick. But I graduated from high school, from Falmouth High School in 2015. And though my science teachers did teach me a bit about climate change, I didn't really begin to understand the true weight of the crisis until I was able to study climate change in college. And this is a similar experience that we've been hearing from students around the state. And we've also been hearing from educators from around the state that they need our support to take this task on. And this bill does just that by providing much needed support to teachers across Maine and funding climate education professional development for teachers and partnerships between schools and community organizations. So I'll leave it at that. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. And thanks, Representative Bloom, for putting the bill forward.
Thank you so much, Anya. I appreciate that. Now we'll hear from Ambassador Molly Dana, who will speak about the tribal sovereignty bill that has been sponsored by Assistant House Majority Leader Rachel Talbot Ross. She actually, the Assistant Majority Leader, is held up in the Judiciary Committee today, so she sends her regrets. Ambassador Dana, thank you so much for speaking to us today.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you all. And I can also be kind of quick, thanks to the support from everybody in our coalition that have done such a beautiful job, helping us with our website. So wabanakaalliance.com, you can find so much more information about LD 1626. So it's a large bill, it's complicated, but it's really not. It's all about modernizing the relationship between the tribes in Maine and the state of Maine, and doing that through amendments to the 1980 Maine Indian Land Claim Settlement Act. So this bill is the result of a task force, which in my opinion was a great success between the tribes and the state, and a real step towards healing that relationship that we all know is quite broken. And this task force studied the Land Claim Settlement Act and federal Indian law, and really got down to work on why things haven't been working and why we need to update this agreement and this relationship. So 1626 does not include gaming. It does include a slate of other recommendations in the areas of criminal and civil jurisdiction, fish and game, natural resources, land use and land acquisition. And really, it's all about bringing tribes into a place of equality with all the other tribes in the country. So the tribes in Maine right now, because of that Settlement Act, do not have access to federal legislation passed since 1980. That was part of the negotiation that the state pushed for. So our tribal negotiators at the time, saw a opportunity for the tribes to get some land back and to help our communities who are in poverty. And they were told this could be amended in time. So now is that time. I would encourage you to look through our resources, and we are so thankful for Maine Conservation Voters and the Priorities Commission. We are so glad that you are continuing to support this bill so strongly, and we are absolutely thankful for the advocacy and the sponsorship of Rep. Talbot Ross. So thank you all.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And I understand that Assistant Majority Leader Rachel Talbot Ross has joined us. Is that true? Representative, are you here?
I am.
Wonderful. So I don't know if you just heard what the ambassador said, but we'd love to hear you say a few words about the tribal sovereignty bill that you're sponsoring, LD 1626.
Absolutely. I apologize. I did not hear the presentation, so I apologize to the ambassador and to all of the listeners. Will not be redundant. I think one of the most important things to understand about the bill is to see it through the lens of the Maine Indian Claims Settlement Act, and not through the lens of moving more state law forward. So that's a very, very big distinction. Every time we move more public law that articulates and applies to the tribes, we are continually keeping the tribes under a very paternalistic state system. The purpose of 1626, and it was written through the lens of the Maine Indian Claims Settlement Act, and which is the federal act, and then the state's implementing act. And that lens, the tribes have always contended, went into that process in order to make the nation-to-nation relationship possible, to restore the tribes to a place of equality and dignity, and to be treated like the over 500 federally recognized tribes in the United States. So I just want to give your viewers that lens to remember that while we simultaneously are moving some state law forward and have been successful in a number of areas, the Violence Against Women's Act is an example from last year, really what we have to stay true to is the restoration of those rights, privileges, powers, duties, and immunities that federally recognized tribes are entitled to within the confines of the United States of America. And I dare say Maine needs to live up to its treaties and restore sovereignty. I hope that wasn't redundant to Ambassador Datas. I just wanted to give the listening audience and viewing audience an understanding about the difference between moving public state law forward and staying true to the restoration of the terms of the Settlement Act.
Thank you so much, Representative Talbot Ross. We really appreciate your words, and we're glad you were able to be here
Thank you.
right on time. So thank you. And I just want to point out again, if you have questions, please send them through Kathleen Meal and the chat, and we hope we can get to those. So next up is a water quality bill, which is particularly relevant in this year, the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act. It doesn't have a bill number yet. It's a committee bill. It will be a bill of the Environment and Natural Resources Committee, and it's being printed, I think, right now, or being worked on. So here to talk about that bill is Nick Bennett from the Natural Resources Council of Maine. Nick, take it away.
Thanks so much, Beth, and hi, everybody. My name is Nick Bennett. I'm the staff scientist for the Natural Resources Council of Maine. And this is a year where DEP has put forward a proposal for upgrading water quality protections for about 800 miles of rivers and streams in Maine. Under both state and federal law, DEP is supposed to do this every 3 years. They upgrade these water quality protections based on improved understanding of the science and improved knowledge about the state of our waters. This year, there are some particularly outstanding stream segments that would be moved to the highest level of protection, which is Class AA. And those include streams, for example, in the Sandy River watershed that are outstanding spawning and rearing habitat for brook trout and salmon. We think this is an excellent bill. It's already gone through a lot of process at the Board of Environmental Protection. Clean water and spectacular cold water fisheries are two of the things that make Maine a great place to live. We all can think of a water body, a river, a stream, or a pond that we love. And this process of upgrading the classifications of these water bodies is one of the most important aspects of our state and federal water quality protection system. And it's based on the ideas of Senator Edmund Muskie, who drafted the Federal Clean Water Act in 1972. And as Beth said, this is the 50th anniversary of that act. And there's no better way to honor the legacy of Edmund Muskie than to pass this bill and improve protections for so many rivers and streams in Maine that are of great value to the environment, to fisheries, and of course, to Maine citizens. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Nick. And before we turn to our last presenter, I want to just let you know that it's a little different. Most of the time, the Environmental Priorities Coalition focuses on advancing good legislation, bills that protect our health, our environment, and our climate future. But unfortunately, some bills that are introduced in the Maine legislature would actually threaten those shared priorities. And when that happens, the EPC steps up to defend against dangerous legislation. And so we call those priorities defensive priorities. And that's the case with our next priority. And John Burroughs from the Atlantic Salmon Federation will tell us more about it. Thank you, John.
Looks like now I'm unmuted. Thank you very much, Beth. As Beth said, my name is John Burroughs. I'm the Executive Director for U.S. Operations for the International Atlantic Salmon Federation. And I am here to discuss, unfortunately, this attack on Maine's environment, which is very unfortunate and very unprecedented. I'm going to start on a positive note before going to the negative side. And just want to say that Maine has been a major leader when it comes to restoring our rivers and our aquatic ecosystems, not just at the national level, but at the international level. This work really began in earnest back when the Edwards Dam was removed from the Kennebec River in 1999. And if we were all sitting in the State House, we would be about 1.5 miles away from that dam site. The breaching of Edwards literally sent ripple effects across the planet. And since then, rivers everywhere have been brought back to life with absolutely tremendous environmental, socioeconomic, and other benefits that have just been absolutely tremendous for communities and rivers across the planet. Unfortunately, as Beth said, today, on the river where this effort began nearly a quarter century ago, we are facing a major threat that, if successful, could impact, prevent, and cease all major future fisheries restoration activities in the state of Maine, could impact our ability to protect and improve water quality, as Mr. Bennett alluded to when talking about water reclassification. And this work could prevent the restoration of the Kennebec River from continuing upwards in the watershed, as well as impacting river restoration on all of Maine's major rivers. This is all being done under LR 2167. And in essence, this effort would take away the powers of our state natural resource agencies. We're talking about Maine IF&W, Maine DMR, Maine DEP, to actually require things like fish passage or dam removal when appropriate, or to set water quality standards, both within hydropower impoundments and in stretches of river below those hydropower dams. Every person in Maine that cares about our rivers, our wildlife, and the health of our estuaries and the Gulf of Maine should really be alarmed by this effort. Not only because of the fact that it's going to prevent future efforts, but because of why this is happening. This seems to be a new trend here in Maine, but this effort really is because of one very large multinational corporation, which is named Brookfield Renewable Partners, that controls most of the large dams on most of Maine's large rivers. They are the reason why this legislation, this effort is before us. And in essence, it comes out of the fact that for over a decade, they have refused to do what's necessary and what is right to continue restoration of sea run fish on the Kennebec River above waterbill. The restoration of species like American shad and river herring has essentially halted. Atlantic salmon, which are critically endangered, need to get past Brookfield's dams. A few adults do so because they're placed into trucks and transported to the Sandy River for spawning. That is not restoration. That's not how you save an endangered species. In addition, Brookfield continues year in and year out to illegally kill endangered salmon on the Kennebec River. Ultimately, the fate of salmon, the fate of the Kennebec, and the fate of our other rivers is going to be largely dependent on the result of what happens with LR 2167. If this effort were to advance forward, Maine would take a step not just backwards 25 years, but to well back into the 20th century when our rivers were open sewers and our fisheries were at a fraction of what they are today. So for folks that care about our rivers, the health of the Gulf of Maine, the health of our commercial and recreational fisheries, we ask you to support opposing LR 2167, which would only hamstring our state agency's ability to protect our public resources. So please help us and help this coalition and all of our partners defeat this effort in the legislature. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. And the reason it hasn't LR yet is it's not been printed yet. This bill has not been printed yet, so it does not have an LD, so we don't exactly know what it will say, but we promise that we will get it to you when it becomes an LD and actually has words that we can read. So thank you to John and to all of you today, all of our priority bill sponsors for introducing such powerful and important legislation, and to all our presenters for sharing so much information in such a succinct amount of time. So thank you so much. There's obviously, these were thumbnails, right? Thumbnail sketches. There's so much more to say about these bills. And later this afternoon, every member of the legislature and everyone who registered for this event will get a follow-up email with links to the EPC website and fact sheets for each of these bills, with a lot more detail and contact information for EPC members leading these campaigns. And for lawmakers, I just want to say that we're counting on your support In a normal year, we'd have briefings at the State House and we'd be having a breakfast. We'd have muffins and coffee and talk to you about these bills, but that's not happening at this point. And there will be opportunities to learn about more of each of these priorities as the session goes on. So please stay tuned, reach out to me and to members of the EPC at any time. And thank you for being our champions in advancing this agenda. And to the public, this agenda is only going to move forward with you taking action. You can count on MCV and all of our EPC partners to keep you posted on opportunities to take action, from offering testimony to writing letters to the editor to reaching out directly to your legislators. You'll receive the very first action alert of the session this afternoon with a link to pledging action on our priority bills. And now we've got some questions that you've been sending that we will attempt to answer. So first, is Senator Carney still here? I do not know that she is, and I think that Sarah Nichols is, so we'll see if she can field this. Does Maine produce enough construction and demolition debris for the necessary daily cover for Juniper Ridge? Sarah?
Can you see me? Sorry, you caught me mid salad eating. The answer is yes. When you take a close look at the materials that are entering the landfill each year, there are plenty of available cover and sludge stabilization materials that could be used that are not sourced from out of state. In addition, for daily cover, the most sustainable way to do that, basically every day at the end of every working day of a landfill, it must be covered with some soil-like material or some other material that prevents, wind-blown litter or, prevents rain from falling in there or odors from escaping or protects from vectors, basically. The most sustainable way to do that is with this type of retractable tarp, basically. You'll hear the landfill operators at Juniper Ridge say that they can't possibly use a tarp because this is because of the weather in Maine and the snow. But I've spoken to landfill operators in other northern New England states and New York, and they've had much success using these tarps, except for maybe 1 or 2 days out of the year when there's really severe weather events. So yeah, that's the answer to that question.
Great. And the other question for this bill is, how would Maine stop out of waste disposal?
So right now, this is really happening through a loophole in our laws, and that's what this bill would aim to do, is to close that loophole. So basically, it's let me just briefly, it's in the 1989 solid waste legislation. The legislature decided that they did not want to be a dumping ground for out of state waste. So we said no new commercial landfills. And as a result of that, the state ended up buying Juniper Ridge landfill in 2004 to prevent it from being filled from out of state waste, because we had the power to say what goes in there and what does not. As part of the operating services agreement between the state and Casella, the landfill operator, it's clear that waste from out of state is to be excluded. The problem is we have a definition in our statutes that says out of state waste also waste generated from within the state includes material that leaves solid waste processing facilities in the state. We have one solid waste processing facility in Lewiston whose main business is importing out of state waste, minimally processing it and sending it to Juniper Ridge. So what this law would do is say that solid waste processing facilities cannot send more waste to Juniper Ridge landfill than they take in from actual Maine sources by weight. So it thereby prevents this transfer station kind of situation where waste is just touching a facility and being sent on to the landfill.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. You were very knowledgeable. So the next question is, do any of these priorities have bipartisan support? And the answer is yes. And actually, I believe that Senator Rick Bennett has joined, and he will speak to his role as the co-sponsor of LD 489, the Pine Tree Amendment. Welcome, Senator Bennett.
Thank you so much, Beth. Great to be with you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, good. Yeah, apologies for fumbling around looking for the connection, but yeah, this is I think a very important measure, and I was happy to respond to Senator Maxman's invitation to co-sponsor this important constitutional amendment. People ask why it's necessary, and I think that frankly, the reason that it's necessary is unhappily we see an abuse of corporate power too often, where we have regulatory capture going on, and it's the people who suffer. So I think it's a very sensible idea, as has been done in a number of other states, to actually protect our right as Maine people to a clean and healthy environment in the Constitution. The measure would set the right within the context of the Declaration of Rights section of the Constitution, where it comfortably fits. And I think it's critical. I applaud Senator Maxman for reaching across the aisle and hearing concerns and objections from some other members of my own party who had concerns like I did about this initial draft. It's been redrafted, and I think it will be an important part of our Constitution. And just in closing, would say, there's nothing that defines us more as Mainers and our common heritage and legacy and love of the environment and our great and precious outdoors. And so it's sort of the thing that you don't think about, but is necessary, but it really is part of our DNA. And so I think it's important part of the Constitution.
Thank you so much, Senator. So I have some questions that have been that we've received through the chat. So, and I don't know if you want to answer these or if Senator Maxman is still on. Why do we need to amend the Maine Constitution? Aren't our laws and regulations enough?
Well, I would defer. Yeah, go ahead, Senator.
Take a whack at that. Oh, sorry, Senator. Just kidding. Oh gosh, I'm really struggling with internet today. That's such a good question, and I think it's along the lines of what I was talking about earlier, which is that our laws can be made. They're made every year. They can be good laws or they can be bad laws. Our laws can also be unmade, and so what our Constitution does is it really guides the types of laws that we can make. So we can't make a law that violates our Constitution, and we can't unmake a law that protects our Constitution. And so that's why it's so important to have our environmental rights enshrined in the Constitution. I've seen people put in bills just in the last few years that are trying to undo net metering and some of these really important climate policies that are vital to protecting our natural resources here in Maine.
Great. Senator, it's hard. You're breaking up.
To happen. We don't want our state to be giving out. I'm so.
Yeah, thank you. Perhaps if you turn off your camera, that we might be able to hear you better.
Is this a little better?
Yes.
Okay. What a disaster today. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I know you're trying to do two jobs at once. So had you finished your thought?
I think I finished.
Okay.
And maybe Senator Bennett can fill in because he knows what's up too.
I think you said all the important things, Chloe. It's just an added layer of protection, which is critical for and deserved when it's something so central, such a core value that is encapsulated in the right.
Great. Thank you both so much. For Representative Grahowski about the Eco Reserve Bill, LD 736. How does LD 736 add land to the ecological reserves without a physical note?
That's a great question. So what LD 736 is doing is not directing that land has to be added. It is removing all the barriers that the Bureau of Parks and Lands currently faces to add additional lands. There are, so it's not requiring that lands be added, but it's giving them flexibility to continue the work that was started over 2 decades ago. I would add that we have an amazing Land for Maine's Future program, something that I'm sure all of you probably supported at the ballot box many times. There is now additional money in that program. That is a great opportunity for the Bureau of Parks and Lands to acquire new lands. And there is also federal money like the Land and Water Conservation Fund that we can use if we leverage it with LMF or other funds. So there's a lot of opportunity right now in particular with the funding landscape to move forward with expanding the ecological reserve system, as long as we get those pesky caps out of the way that are holding us back.
Great. So what you just said is there will be no general fund fiscal note and there are other funds available right now.
That is the short version of it, yes.
Thank you so much. For Representative Lydia Bloom and about your climate change education bill, has the Maine Education Association and our other teacher groups voiced support for LD 1902?
Oh, yes, very strong support. I was actually approached by a teacher for this bill. It has actually been prioritized by the teachers across the state as one of their major needs. They want this. They've been asking for it. And so it is, and the Department of Education was worked with very closely to develop this bill. So it's very well vetted. It's been an extremely strong consortium of teachers and nature-based educators that have helped put this together and worked very hard and diligently. And by the way, we have a public hearing on this next Tuesday. So action alert.
Okay. There's another question here. How is 1902, your bill, similar to or different from LD 291, which regards teaching about Maine's Native Americans? The LD 291, the questioner asks, has not been widely followed in Maine schools, and why? How has this been drafted to secure wider implementation?
Well, what it is, it's not anything new. This is really to help teachers with the national science standards that we adopted in 2019. So this is not a new set of scholastic teaching. This is just helping the teachers do what they are supposed to be doing, and they've been calling for help, and that's what it's about. So it's not the same thing at all. It's really about the national science standards that we adopted in 2019.
Great, thank you. And another question about your bill: is it funded through the general fund? Would it be funded through the general fund?
Yes, it's a pilot program. It would be funded over 3 years. And the Department of Education would hire somebody to help administer this program. And then it would be assessed after 3 years as to its efficacy, and hopefully be continued, as it has been continued in other states who have followed the same process. So it's been very successful and very welcome in other states. And the time is now, again, to do it, because it's in our climate action plan to do this kind of thing. And it's also, it's a good time because of funding that maybe we can do this now.
Okay, thank you. And moving on to the Tribal Sovereignty Bill, LD 1626, Representative Talbot Ross and Ambassador, could you say a little more about the existing Indian Claims Settlement Act, the goals for the future, and why these relationships are important? Those are big questions. And if you could be as concise as possible, please, we're running out of time here.
I can start if you like. So the existing 1980 Settlement Act, it basically has set up a framework where the state is in control over the tribes in a lot of jurisdictional areas. It blocks us from that federal legislation. And the goals moving forward were to be to amend that in a way that really makes this relationship a lot more workable. And I forgot the third part of the question.
Why these existing relationships are important?
So the vagueness in the Settlement Act and how it's been interpreted over the years has led to a lot of distrust, a lot of confusion, a lot of oppression against the tribes, and I don't think anybody enjoys it. So I think if we're going to really heal this and walk forward together, we need to address sovereignty in a meaningful way.
Thank you. And there are a few other questions here that have come in. Do you know how many groups currently support LD 1626? Can you quantify that?
I think it's upwards of 40. Yeah, I lost count, but we've certainly have a big coalition now, and we're really happy about that.
Great, thank you. And
I
the
would just
last
add-
question. Oh, sorry, go on.
I would just add as a call to action, if there are groups out there or individuals out there that would like to get involved, we can certainly give you that information. So there is a coalition that meets every Friday morning. We'll be meeting tomorrow morning. So if there are folks who are interested in learning more and joining that coalition, make sure that you do. We'll give you that information.
Thank you, Representative. And the last question on this bill is, how will passing LD 1626 benefit rural communities in addition to the tribes in Maine?
I can start to answer that. I mean, each one of our federally recognized tribes is an economic engine for the region in which they are situated in the state. And so one example is the Holton Band of Maliseets, employ people within that whole region, help stand up other businesses in that region. And so I would say that each one restoring sovereignty allows for the self-governance of our tribes and the self-determination that only benefits all Mainers and all regions of Maine. So yeah, that's how I would answer. I don't know about you, Ambassador.
I think you covered it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So now there are questions about the water reclassification bill. The first question is, did you miss the LD? No, the LD has not been assigned yet. The bill is still being drafted in the revisor's office, so there is no LD yet. And again, that will be the sponsor. Actually, it's a little different. The committee, the Environment and Natural Resources Committee, is the sponsor of the bill. It is their bill. So that's the status of that. But so now for questions for Nick, where does the state stand with current clean water conditions? And is there a list of all water bodies that would be upgraded through the water quality reclass process?
Yes, there is a list. It's a little bit complicated to find, but you can find it on the Department of Environmental Protection's website if you search for Triennial Review. And very soon, because there is a draft bill, there will be a list that comes out when that bill is printed, and that will have a list of all the proposed upgrades. Maine's water quality is one of its most precious resources. Maine has some of the most outstanding waters in the country. We are the last stronghold of brook trout fishing in the continental US because we have so many great clean streams, and people come from all over the country and the world to fish, paddle, and swim in Maine waters. We can thank Senator Muskie for the great progress that we've made in Maine from the days when you could literally, or not literally, but figuratively walk across the river on the pollution that and logs that were clogging them. Right now, our rivers are the crown jewels of the state, and it doesn't mean that all the work is done. There are still improvements that can be made, and we still need to work towards those. But Maine rivers, streams, ponds, and oceans and coasts are a great resource for all of its people, for our wildlife, and for our economy.
Thank you, Nick. The last question I have here, does the bill reclassify the lower Presumscot River from Class C to Class B?
The bill does not recommend doing that. The Board of Environmental Protection did not recommend going forward with that proposal.
So the second part of that question, but will the EPC recommend that upgrade?
The EPC has not voted to recommend that upgrade. We've also not voted against that upgrade. We have only voted on the contents of the bill as proposed.
Thank you. And this, we have two more questions, and they have to do with the dam bill. I love talking about the dam bill. So the sponsor, the main sponsor of the dam bill, the defensive priority, is Senate President Troy Jackson. There are not co-sponsors yet. Again, that bill also has not been printed. So we do not have the co-sponsors yet or the LD, but hopefully we will soon. The bills are being printed more quickly than they were last year. So the question for John is, can you share more about how the legislature will respond to the bill?
I actually am not 100% sure, Beth, to be honest with you. There is no bill language that's been presented, at least publicly. There's a concept. The title of the resolve is fairly lengthy and sounds kind of good on paper. But it somehow made it through legislative council. But at this point, those details have not come out, and I'm not sure how it will be, how it will be received. And I'll be very anxious to know for the public hearing, and also once we get the language to then share that with all of our legislators.
Great, thank you so much. So, wow, seems like we've gone through the questions, which just surprises me. I didn't think we could do that. So that's wonderful. Thank you all for asking them. So the call to action today, we usually have a call to action, is how can you help support these initiatives? The answer is email your local state senator and representative and ask them to vote for these bills. And thank you so much. Thank you to our speakers today. Thank you so much to Senator Ann Carney, Senator Chloe Maxman, Senator Rick Bennett, Assistant Majority Leader Rachel Talbot Ross, Ambassador Molly and Dana, Representative Bloom, Representative Grohosky, and our EPC partners on your right from the Sierra Club, Nick Bennett from NRCM, John Burroughs from the Atlantic Center Salmon Federation, and thank you to the 37 organizations that make up Maine's Environmental Priorities Coalition, and to all the work that's been done on the back end by Kathleen Meal and Will Sedlak and Chess Gundrum. Really, they just do phenomenal work in making all of this possible. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We actually are 3 minutes early. Isn't that exciting? Woohoo! And again, please be on the lookout for the email that's headed your way this afternoon that will give you more information about this bill, and we'll also provide a link to the recording. So if you know someone who might be interested in seeing this presentation, they can virtually later on. Thank you so much, all of you. Have a good day. Goodbye.